I'm Sarah Borson-Quito. In conjunction with Nareit's REITwise 2021, I'm speaking today with Stephen Giordano, Principal at KPMG. Stephen, thanks for joining me today.
It's nice to be here, Sarah.
As REITs continue to improve the energy efficiency of their properties, can you discuss some of the tax issues that they may need to resolve?
Many REITs, like real estate businesses in general, want to be able to take advantage of the various green subsidies and incentives. The first challenge is really being able to even use the subsidy as it's intended. Federal tax credits, for example, they tend to be non-refundable, and REITs, by design, often don't have the taxable income to be able to use them, which sort of can render them, at least with respect to the REIT, useless, or at the very least not as useful as they really could be and arguably ought to be. State and local tax incentives, they sometimes present different difficulties. Often there are questions around, do they create taxable income? And if so, how is it treated for REIT purposes? Oftentimes these issues can be managed, but it just makes the process a little bit less straightforward for businesses. And therefore it sort of counteracts some of the benefits that they really are intended to produce.
The 2017 tax reform law limited the deductibility of interest under Section 163J. What are some of the outstanding issues in that area for REITs?
Well, Sarah, the final regulations went a long way toward resolving a lot of the technical questions that faced REITs when the proposed regulations had been issued. So, for instance, there had been questions about whether or not UP-REITs, which are umbrella partnership REITs, might not have been able to benefit from the streamlined sets of rules that applied to REITs wanting to elect out of the interest limitations. The final regulations largely solved those. Now what REITs primarily face is the question as to whether or not to elect out of 163J. Now that's an important choice because once the election out is made, it is irrevocable. This decision is closely linked to depreciation decisions taken by the REIT and really the way they're going to deploy their capital and where. Modeling is of course key, and really that's the question. Making sure you get that modeling right, you get the numbers right.
Many states encourage investment by implementing tax increment financing. What is this, and what are some of the tax implications for REITs specifically in connection with this type of financing?
That's an interesting question. I think the Platonic concept of tax increment financing, or TIFs, is that a portion of the increase compared to a benchmark, in other words, the increment of local taxes, is shared with the developer of the property as a sort of incentive to the development. Typically, this applies to property taxes, or frequently it applies to property taxes, but it can also apply to other types of taxes, such as sales taxes. The point is, the development helps the tax base, and as a result, the government shares some of that increase in tax base with the developer. Now, there are a lot of jurisdictions doing this. I get questions related to these issues from clients all the time, particularly those that are engaged in mixed-use development. So in other words, developing a property where there's both a residential component, maybe an office component, and certainly a retail component. Now, in some cases, these TIFs can look fairly simple, something that sort of resembles a property tax rebate. In other cases where the concepts are a little bit more complex, the IRS has issued private letter rulings, which at least provide some helpful guideposts for practitioners and investors looking to make sense of all this. But because there are so many jurisdictions doing these things, it means that they can take a lot of different forms. It also means that using the term tax increment financing, or TIF, isn't all that helpful. It doesn't really tell you all that much about what you have in front of you. And that's really something that can be a challenge. It's a challenge because it creates, I think, misunderstandings out there as to what's in front. And it also multiplies the number of tax issues that are faced by REITs, real estate investors, and their advisors.
Stephen, thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Take care.
And for more news and analysis on REITs, be sure to visit Nareit's website, REIT.com.